You lost it. Think about it. Work.
You niggas serving up a bad batch, too much bacon on it. Bacon on it.
Ravens, they do not have their defensive coordinator anymore. Dan Pease, I think it is. Dean Pease. Dean Pease has picked up shop and he has left. And he is now a defensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans. So Mike Vrabel has him over there in Tennessee. We're not talking about Tennessee, though. We're talking about the Ravens. Now, this is the last little stint of Ozzie Newsome. He's been the GM of the team, I think, since about 96 or 98 or whatever, whenever the team started. I mean, to think about a expansion team like the Ravens have won multiple championships, I think 2, is pretty good for an expansion team. And, Ozzie Newsome is a big credit to it, the way he's drafted. And I think he has his hands all over this last little draft class that he's going to be involved in, and I think he did a very, very good job of it. When you talk about the Ravens, something I was thinking about was how Joe Flacco didn't play any in the preseason. He didn't really play any training camp or anything like that, and I kind of chalked it up as this is just a quarterback that doesn't go through the bullshit. He's fucking fine. He'll step up week 1 and everything will be fine. Well, in reality, that kind of went that way. It went that way and it was fine. I think if a back injury happened to Flacco this offseason, I think it'd be 10 times more detrimental just because they have a completely new receiving core. I think this preseason and the offseason is going to be huge to get this chemistry right. We're talking about adding Willie Snead. We're talking about adding Michael Crabtree and John Brown. 3 new receivers. Wallace out. Macklin out. Woodhead retired. So we're talking about Brashard Perriman, I think, is still there. We're talking about basically a completely new team. And I like at the wide receiver position, I should say. And I mean, they didn't really lose a lot on defense. They didn't really lose a lot on offense per se. I guess they did lose Ryan Jensen on the offensive line. That was a tough loss. That was a tough loss. And then Benjamin Watson, another guy they lost to New Orleans, but that's not that big of a deal. The Ravens, to me, they're about 8-8 every year. They have one of the top 10. Maybe I don't want to say top 5 because I don't want to get my shit cut off. But like top 10 defense every year. Their defense keeps them in games. Their offense has always been ass. So it's like you don't expect a lot out of their offense. But now when I'm looking at their team and the way their offense has been adding people and the way the running game got going last year with Alex Collins, you re-signed Alex Collins. I'm kind of convinced that this team is looking to be better offensively. I'm not saying their defense is going to be worse this year. I think their defense is going to be good, and I think a lot of times when you're like, well, how the fuck are the Ravens in this game, or how the fuck are the Ravens 7-7? It's because defense really holds a lot in the NFL, and when you have a good defense that can hold their own, that can stop the opposition, that can create opportunities for your offense, that makes you that much better. Just look at the Jaguars. I mean, the Jaguars were an ass turd team, and they totally turned their team around last year because of their defense and special teams. It was not because their offense was any good. So talking about their draft picks, Hayden Hurst at tight end. They've needed a tight end for years. I think great pick because half the time I see Flacco, this is the Ravens offense. It's going to be an I formation or a one-back set, and they're going to do a play action. Well, if it's not play action, it's going to be a run, and if not, it's a play action. Flacco has 3 options on the pass. He can go deep to his speedy wide receiver, that's deep. He can toss it to his fullback that was like half blocking, half got like stuck at the line but got through and he gains 3 yards in a completion. Or he's got a tight end. Last year he had no tight end, so that was not an option. He was going fullback. He was going to this Ortiz guy every time. I swear to God, like you'd look up and he was thrown to the fullback. I'd be like, man, I ain't gonna fucking add this fucking fullback one week when I need a fucking spot start, and he's probably going to get me a TD because I don't know how many times. Or like 2 years ago, they had this guy that starts with a J. I forgot his name. He plays for somebody else now. But he would fucking always be scoring touchdowns for the Ravens. I was like, man, I fucking signed him because Flacco doesn't do – like the Ravens offense is not very like – it's not complex. It's very simple. It's either we're running, and if we're not running, we're checking out to a pass, and we're doing a play-action pass, and I'm probably going to dump it. So I thought Hayden Hurst was a really good pick because I feel like he hasn't really had that tight end option. And something you got to understand about tight ends, it's a security blanket. It's not – and when I say that, you have to like your blanket. You know, it doesn't feel like a security blanket if you don't fucking like it. Tony Romo liked his fucking security blanket in Jason Witten. That fucking worked. For some reason, Flacco really liked Dennis Pitta. But for some reason, Dennis Pitta was hurt every fucking year. Every fucking year, his hip would get out of place. So they never really had that tight end. I think Hayden Hurst is going to be a huge tight end. I think he's going to be really good. My comparison of Hayden Hurst was Jason Witten, honestly. They also drafted Mark Andrews, another good tight end. This guy's a way more – I think Hayden Hurst is more balanced. I think Mark Andrews is a way more receiving type tight end. So think about this, having Hayden Hurst on one side, Mark Andrews on the other, and then one's going out for a pass, one's blocking. Vice versa. Both going out for a pass. Fucking you're sending Mark Andrews out to the slot for a little post over the middle. Whatever. I like the picks. Lamar Jackson. Okay. Flacco's not that old, but also Flacco's not that good. Flacco's not Rivers, and Flacco's isn't Big Ben. So we're not going to have Flacco as our quarterback till he's fucking 40. Like, Flacco's one of those guys that needs to be ushered out, like Brett Favre. Like, he needs to go to a different team. Like, he needs to be asked to raise his level of play. And by doing that, he needs to be sent somewhere else. So I think, maybe not this year, maybe not the next year. But when Joe Flacco's contract up, I don't think the Ravens are going to re-sign him. And if they do, it's going to be a short-term deal because he's going to be like 35, 36 by then. And my other thing is I think I really like the Lamar Jackson pick. They could this guy to me is the next Michael Vick. I think the kid is awesome. I think the reason that he caught so much flack in the NFL draft process is because he didn't hire an agent. If he would have hired an agent, he would have been just fine. Like, he probably would have gone 10 picks earlier or so. Like, I think he still went in the first round. So, he was still a first-round pick. But, he might have gone 10, 15 picks earlier if he would have had an agent. And that's just how it is. They hate on the guys that don't have agents because they want them to feel stupid, or they want them to feel like, oh, why don't you have an agent? Like, we're going to show you this is why you hire an agent. Just so that agent can have fucking 3% of your salary. Fuck that. Let's continue. Anthony Averett, Alabama. They love drafting guys out of Alabama. Or Dean Pease did, because he drafted Rashad Evans out of Alabama. But they have a lot of Alabama players. C.J. Mosley. They had a defensive line that they got last year. They draft a lot of Alabama players. Anthony Averett is one of them. Kenny Young, I like Kenny Young, linebacker out of UCLA, will fit right in with this linebacking core. Jaleel Scott, really, really lanky, tall wide receiver. I think he could have some real potential. Jordan Lashley, more of a slot receiver out of UCLA. He fell in the draft process because of an arrest or something that he had last year, but he's a pretty good player. I don't know. The thing is I don't know if he was good enough to be drafted. He was drafted pretty late. Not that late. I think he was 4th or 5th round. Deshaun Elliott out of Texas, really like this kid, really going to be a stud. They got him at a time, later in the draft, which I thought was pretty good. Greg Senat out of Wagner, he's a tackle, really big dude. Bradley Bozeman out of Alabama, another Alabama guy. We'll see how these Alabama linemen translate. They play really good as a unit, but once they get out on their own in the NFL, it's kind of a different story. You never really hear about this Alabama player doing this, or this Alabama offensive lineman doing that. They play really good as a unit when they're at Alabama, and they have good blocking schemes, I think, when they're at Alabama. But I think the blocking schemes become a little bit more individual when you get to the NFL, and it sucks for them. Zach Zeeler, DN out of Ferris State. Hadn't heard a lot about him. I do know that he was at Ferris State, and he's a defensive end. So some of the team – okay, it's free agents. We talked about the free agents. Some of the team needs that I thought they needed wide receivers, they needed a DN, they needed a guard, they needed a tight end, they needed a center. They basically added all that. They basically added all that. Other than Ryan Jensen, they lost Ryan Jensen, and they didn't really. Well, they got Orlando Brown too. If I didn't mention that, I think Orlando Brown went to the perfect place just because his dad played here. He had a really tough time in the prospect. If you looked at his film from last year, he was probably the top guy that you would have took. And then his combine came out, and he just looked lethargic, and his combine looked bad. He didn't even he's a 350. I don't know what his weight is. But he's probably 350 pounds as an offensive lineman, and I think he had a guy with one arm throw up more weight than him, or throw up like the 225 more times than he did. Like he wasn't trying. Like the Ravens told him, like, hey, we're gonna draft you regardless. Like just fuck this combine shit off, and and don't fucking make your draft stock just awesome. We're drafting. I don't know if that happened. And he wanted to go there because his dad played there, or like I don't really know. But talking about them, they need to replace. They need a wide receiver, or they need to sign Mike Wallace. They did that in Crabtree and Snead. Add offensive linemen or re-sign players. They re-added James Hurst, who's an offensive lineman, which was good. But Ryan Jensen went to Tampa, which I think was a huge loss. Ryan Jensen had a really huge year last year. Addressed the running back situation with Collins and West. West is a free agent. Collins is on the roster, so that was good. And then draft defense. I said draft defense. Knowing that that's usually what they do, which surprisingly – this is one of the first drafts that I've seen, and I think it's because Dean Pease is gone and the defense is pretty well taken care of. But the first 4 picks were offense, and I was really surprised that they only drafted 4 defensive players out of their 12 picks. I think they had only 4 were defensive. The Ravens and the Steelers to me are one of those teams that always drafts defense and usually drafts a defensive player first, the first round. So I was surprised that they waited as long as they did. Not that they needed it or whatever, but I think their strength is their solid defense across the entire unit. I think a weakness is their offensive explosiveness. Now, they're doing a better job with trying to add players, but what's the difference between Crabtree and Snead and Macklin and Wallace? You might be able to say Crabtree and Snead are a couple inches better than them, or Wallace is a couple inches better than Snead, but I just don't feel as if they're really they're bettering their receiving core. Now I think Crabtree's a step up, but I just feel like for the fact you're losing Wallace and you're replacing him with Crabtree. Okay, well now you're losing Macklin and you're replacing him with Snead. It's okay, what are you really doing? You're just hopefully the chemistry between Crabtree and Flacco is good. Hopefully the chemistry between Snead and Flacco is good, because those are the things that are really going to have to come into play if this team wants to be successful. If this team wants to, make a playoff. And I see them going about 8-8. I mean, I see them winning a game and losing a game, winning a game and losing a game, winning a game and losing a game. Just like the last 2 years that I've watched them, they'll win a game and then they'll lose one. They'll go on they'll lose 3 in a row, and you'll be like, oh, they fucking suck. They're 4-7, and then they'll go and they'll win the last 5 games of the season. They'll be 9-7. And they'll creep into playoffs. This team is just your ultimate mediocre team, because their defense is really good and their offense is really bad, which balances out to being an average team, and they're probably going to be about 8-8. Did like their draft though. I mean, they did have a shit ton of picks, but I was impressed with their draft.
Turn that shit up. Yeah, double in my emblem. I can go where